Thank you.
All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and place a sacred cubit um, on the north, south, east, west axis. This is how you'd create temple space. The first thing the pharaoh would do is they'd strike the east or north, south, east, west axis. So we're going to put a sacred cubit here, and then we're going to put a royal cubit. These are 1/8-inch dowel rods that you can get at the Home Depot. Whole set costs about $6. Here, can you hold these for a minute? Okay. So another volunteer. There you go, Sandy K. So let's stand outside here first. There you go. So we're standing in a double helix. One of the helix is governed by the pentagon, and the other helix is governed by the hexagon. This is the same double helix that a pyramid energy is basically binding. The Egyptians called it the fettering of two currents. The pentagon comes from heaven, the hexagon comes from earth. And in most of the ideograms, they cinch the silver cord here. You've seen that ideogram. Well, that's where the fettering of two currents. That's the knot that's tied. When that knot unties, you go away. So if I put your hand out here, resist, and if I take and go clockwise, resist. If I go counterclockwise, so that tells me the pattern of the pentagon counterclockwise. So if I take the hexagon counterclockwise, nope, clockwise. So the hexagon and the pentagon are always inversely opposed. That's called alternation. So if you could look at the energy field, you'd see this. That's what we're doing all day long, going between those two currents. So now come in here. Now I've placed the royal cubit and the sacred cubit. And in the pyramid, now just put this in your palm. So those cubit rods have produced pentagon energy. Okay? But no hexagon yet. So let me go get the black cubit and the Riemann cubit. Ah, here they are. So you put these at the corner. And they don't have to be exact. Notice I'm laying these on the ground. You can stand them up in the corner. I take my two cubits, tape them together, and stand them up in the corner. So here's the Riemann cubit. That's nitrogen. There's your, it's named after Dr. Riemann. It's just what they call it in standard Egyptology, Doreen. It's very forgiving. Like, you don't have to put your house doesn't have to be perfectly square for these cubits to work. I've got an L-shaped condo, so I included the garage. So my car is always happy. So now that I've introduced the Riemann and the black cubit, now we've produced hexagonal energy. Thank you. So to my knowledge, this is the cheapest pyramid you can build. You don't have to go home and tear the roof off of your house and build the perfect pyramid, because now we're standing in pyramid energy. And so, thank you. Now, who's the man that straddled the ley lines? Ah, there you are. So now, stand over this ley line here. Is this? Finger up. Put your little finger up. Ley line went away. All gone. Stand over here. Perfect. So that's how you neutralize the ley lines. I've done areas as large as a football field. Uh, at a few events at Marion Dean's a few years ago, I did the whole area. Just changes the whole place. So now I've reduced the ley lines. If I spread these out to the entire room, there'd be no ley line grid. You would be in temple space, in pyramid space. So back in the day, our good friend Gandalf started teaching us about glia cells. And to me, I'd never heard about glia cells when he started talking about that. Well, the glia cell system is your primitive nervous system that shows up way before the sympathetic or the parasympathetic nervous system. In primitive one-cell animals, this is called cytoplasmic tissue. When you walk down the beach and you see a seashell, that's cytoplasmic tissue. Fast forward to the human frame, our glia cell, which is like a net stocking over the entire body, is the cytoplasmic tissue. That's what our body built for protection. So what's unique about this nervous system, it's not hardwired into the parasympathetic or the sympathetic. It's a separate nervous system, and the nervous system knows immediately what the little toe is experiencing at this cell here. That's your early warning device. And so the glial cell system, right now, we're being inundated by massive amounts of microwave frequencies. And the microwave frequencies are causing a condition called glioma, which is an incurable neurological disease. The medical people have I can't find a homeopathic for it. There's no herbs for it. It's once you damage the DNA structure of your glial cell system, it just starts to write its own program. So cell phone addiction, that's like start to back off on these cell phones. Don't have these cell phones in your bedroom when you're sleeping because they're constantly radiating. So this type of field starts to neutralize that type of energy. It's pyramid energy. Any questions? So it's real easy. You've got the links for these rods. Just get them cut out, north, south, east, west. Do your corners. That's the second thing the Pharaoh would do. They'd basically mold for. Pardon? Well, they're all over. Oh. So I only have one copy of this, but this is the Cameron orometer. Mark knew Bill Cox. I met Bill Cox in 1970, and he was on our tour in 1980. Bill Cox and Dean Hardy were two of the best dowsers I've ever watched work. So the Cameron orometer is unique in that it allows me to have a free hand, so I don't have to have two rods working. And because the ley line is shut down here, if I move into this ley line, now if you'll just remove those two rods. So then once we neutralize those rods, see how that deflects? Now, the width of the line is usually 8.333 inches. That's the wavelength of hydrogen. That kind of tells us that we're walking around in a hydrogen field, and it also confirms that we're a hydrogen-based vehicle. That's what we run on. That's why we're sympathetic to the pyramid. The pyramid's tuned to the heart governing central meridian. That's the word made thrice great. Heart governing central meridian, all same frequency. So you just simply put the rods back. Oh, no, there you go, in the short one, yeah. All gone. So that's making your house into a pyramid. Now, because the glial cell system is interesting, our parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems are a continuous neuron. The glial cell system has gaps, specific splice, where at this end of the glial cell system, you have a hexagon shape. At this end, you have a pentagon shape. In physics, that causes a photon jump. That's how the glia cells are transferring energy. That's why it's such a sensitive system. So that photon jump, Once you stake out your house and create pyramid energy, now you're starting to balance the glia cells. So I've had these rods in my house for close to 15 years. My son's had it in his house for 15 years. I know that it has quite a dynamic effect on the glia cell system. Like I'm 78 right now, and it's not much aging going on. So again, this is what you're doing. You're actually supporting the glia cell system. And this is what the Egyptian masters understood. That's why every one of their temples, there's a book by Mers Blantz. It's probably one of the best books on ley lines that you can find. And she studied in Egypt and found that when you'd come to the exterior wall of an Egyptian temple, based on how many ley lines, it's like, imagine you find a little hole in your shirt and you start to separate it. So based on how far you put the rods, suddenly I'm now pushing maybe 5 or 6 ley lines, and they're outside the temple wall. So that creates this huge barrier. That's why some people can't even go into the temples. They stop. It's also why the temples have such an amazing healing effect. All right, grab your seats. You do the whole school. Pass these out. There you go. There you go. It wouldn't have any effect on the like the blue lights, the fluorescent. Get rid of them. Yeah, go to LED. Yeah. Okay. Who wants to see somebody levitated? All right. What I need is I need the person who wants to be levitated. They get to have a seat in the chair. There you go. And then I need 4 levitators. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So a lot of us, I saw this experiment back in grade school where you'd have a person sit down in a chair and you'd have the 4 people stack their hands up over and they'd be lighter. So the lift is, I want you to come over here with your hands like this, and you're going to put your hands right under there and lift. Yeah. And I need another lifter here. You'll do the leg there.
Like this? Or
yeah, just like this. Just
like this?
Yeah. And then you're going to do a lift. I need one more lifter. Okay. And then you put this under the armpits. Well, you got a rough wrist. All right. Yeah. We need a substitute. Another lifter. She has a wrist she's recovering from. One more lifter. Okay, we got one. So you kind of put your hands together like this. And
he was just coming for something else. Come on, mister.
Okay.
Like this, back here.
Okay. Sure.
We're just telling you we're just doing the usual. Which one?
Okay, now, the first thing I did was I removed 4 of the black cubits that were positioned at the corners. So now we only have, I'm sorry, Riemann, 4 of the Riemann cubits. So now all I have at the corner are the black cubits. Okay, so go ahead and let's see if we can get him off the chair there. Not budging. Okay, well, let's see if you got, hold that rod. Okay, now see how you do. There's less weight, isn't there? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Now, when we did this years ago, we put my wife, Doreen, in the center. Sandy Kay was one of the lifters, 3 other lifters. And because Doreen was only about 114 pounds, she about went through the ceiling. Yeah. Try it again there. Just do a lift without it. Okay. And there's the rod. Yeah. Yeah, it gets pretty wild. So thank everybody. So really good job. So what we've done is basically one of the things that causes illness in the body is we start to, our carbon imprint starts to get out of balance with the rest of us. And it's easy to collect carbon stuff. You just have to have a bad diet, a lot of starch, fats. And so by handing the Riemann cubit, which is nitrogen, resonating with nitrogen, that basically displaces the carbon in the body, made him lighter. So this is one of the keys, Mary's favorite subject, the rods of Ptah. Here they are. My mentor, D.J. Nelson, said that the head mason would stand at the stone, and the stone is on this track. And it's much like a particle accelerator, because then they would start to lighten the carbon imprint of the stone by using certain words of power, and then the priest would strike the stone, and whoop, and it would take off. But because they didn't understand particle generators the first time, there's probably a 2.5-ton limestone block circulating around the planet someplace. So along that pathway, they'd have to control the speed of the block and shut it down, and then strike it again and move it along like that. And you can just walk along and move the block, and then you're singing green sleeves. And there's specific spells in the book of Coming Forth by Day that talk about making your arms glow like turquoise. So you're also in state. So any levitation requires the reduction of the carbon footprint. And that's what the nitrogen rods do. Oh, that's the Book of the Dead, the Egyptian Book of the Dead. Its classical name is Coming Forth by Day. There's several translations, Budges, but and then you can also get a collector's book, the Pyramid of Unas. Has something like 237 of the 500 spells that were used by the priests. And that pretty much was like an instruction manual for running the body. So the last sheet I handed out, take a look at the this page.
This is a small conceptual thing, okay? You're replacing carbon with hydrogen. Or
Nitrogen.
with nitrogen.
Yeah.
Physiologically, what does that change? You're changing the carbon in the body.
Well, you're getting rid of the bad carbon. The Egyptians understood what they call a green cycle, where the heavy carbon particulate floats up to the atmosphere, stratosphere, and it engages with nitrogen. Nitrogen then takes that toxic carbon and changes it into carbon 60, C60. And then it comes back down to Earth, but now it's a functional carbon, and it can play the role that carbon plays in agriculture.
He became lighter.
Yeah, because when I handed him the nitrogen rod, and there was no other nitrogen in that area, then he became the focal point for the activity of the nitrogen rod on his energy field, and it just starts taking, and the longer he'd hold that, the lighter he'd get. That's why you noticed on the second lift, he was even easier to lift. So this sheet here, the two sheets go together. This sheet here shows you the source of where this information comes from. I created this sheet when we had our clinic back in 1986, and it uses the dermatones on the body, and you have 28 dermatones. Down here is your embryo, and the embryo has 28 dermatones. The dermatones are what control the 28 layers of fascia in the human body. And so the Egyptians then understood that, and they built a huge geodetic temple about 600 miles central axis to record this technology. So this serves us in two ways. I use this chart to measure pathology levels. If I get exposed to a parasite today, if my immune system can't get rid of that parasite within the next few days, then all of a sudden that parasite level can be up to maybe 4 dermatones. If in 30 days my immune system can't get rid of that parasite, you're up to 2 zones. 60 days, you're up to 5 zones. In 90 days, if you haven't cleared that pathology, it can be up to the top dermatome. And so there's a simple way to do kinesiology muscle testing. You can take a homeopathic test ampoule for a specific parasite once you've identified that's the parasite, and you can measure the number of dermatones that that parasite's occupying, which will then tell you how long you have to do your protocol, anywhere from 75 to 90 days. I work specifically with Hannah Kroger's vibropathics. How many people know Hannah Kroger? I met Hannah in 1982 out at the Global Science Congress, and she found out I had a clinic. She says, "What are you doing about parasites?" I says, "I try to avoid them." She knew she was dealing with an idiot. So anyway, she introduced me to her vibropathic. She worked with the famous Dr. Malcolm Ray out of England, who used a dowsing technique. It's called the Malcolm Ray cards. All of her vibropathics are made by literally cardboard discs. Malcolm Ray cards that introduced the vibration to the homeopathic. So he measured the entire spectrum of parasites, going all the way from the big dumb tapeworms to single-cell toxoplasmosis. And each group has a specific vibration. So Hannah has 20 vibropathic remedies that cover the entire parasite spectrum. And I've never seen the remedies fail if you take them for 75 to 90 days. So when you become malnourished, you can measure malnourishment starting at the bottom dermatome. You'll lose your minerals from the bottom up. Thank God we don't lose them the top down. That'd really be a mess. So you can, if you have a test ampoule for a supplement, you can use the test ampoule, or you can take a sticky note. This is CoQ10. Do I have a volunteer? Okay, come on up. So whether you speak it, write it, or have the actual remedy, the way I check this out is we do an arm test. Okay, resist. And it's going to look like I'm going to propose to you. So do an arm test again. So if I take this CoQ10, just simply written on a piece of paper, and I put it between the base of the foot and the ankle, so you're a quart low. Now, if I go up to the next dermatome, which is above the ankle, and measure that dermatome, resist. See, if I go to below, so it's a quick way of literally diagnosing your nutritional level. So if you're just one digit, it's only going to take about a week or so. Thank you.
To do it, integrating the 2 sides of my brain, and I do it one high and one low, and
yeah. I've got a lot of people that have been on the Monday night calls that are actually, working with these affirmations, and they just flat work. I work with a group in Austria that can't get Hannah Kroger's vibropathics. So the first person I was working with, stage 3, stage 4 cancer patient, I says, "Well, are you metaphysical?" And she says, "Yeah." I says, "Well, I want you to repeat Protozoa 6X, and I want you to say that 4 times to a glass of water and do it 3 times. So when you repeat something 4 times, the water molecule just picks up that vibration. If you say it 3 times, it doesn't get it. So 4 affirmations, you've also charged your body with that frequency. And so you can, I call it a homeopathic in a bottle, or a prayer in a bottle. And it's extremely effective. Any questions so far? Yes?
So when you give me if you had handed me 2, 3, or 4, would it have made a difference?
It probably would have made a big difference if I'd have handed you the double Riemann. Yeah, and this is 2 Riemann cubits. It's the 5th sacred measurement the Egyptians used. And what's interesting is Piazza Smith, when he studied the Great Pyramid in the 1880s, they determined that the location of the Great Pyramid at the 30th north parallel was the perfect measurement for barometric pressure. And so the range of barometric pressure on the planet is 29¼ inches to 30 inches. And that's how the barometric pressure. So the Egyptian masters also understood barometric pressure, and they knew that the principle of nitrogen is what influences barometric pressure. Yeah. So the Egyptians then, speaking of the rods of Ptah, just as there's 15 specific angles for each meridian in the body, there's also 15 different rod lengths. So you can use rod lengths to balance out the meridians, put the rod in a glass of water. So it's really, and what's interesting is the Egyptians understood the relationship of linear length to rotation of degrees. And that was one of the big things that Einstein was working on relative to quantum entanglement. And so relative to quantum entanglement, it's the relationship of your hexagon to your pentagon field, and that's called alternation. Now, in the work of Dr. Hiroshi Motoyama back in the late 70s, he began showing the relationship of the physical body to the electromagnetic field to what he called the causal body. And there's probably a lot of different names for these 3 bodies. Again, it's the word made thrice great. So what's interesting about disease is the physical body, because it has polarity, can be damaged. The astral body, because it has polarity, can be damaged and out of balance. But the causal body has no polarity. That's the perfect body that you access in prayer. When you ask the physical and the ethereal, the astral body, to come into balance, you reference the causal body and bring that down. And that's your imprint. So the Egyptians then had a method called walking with the double. And that's a purposeful management of the energy field where you're literally taking physical information in a perfect formula and you're transferring that up into the causal body. It's like banking. So then when the day of, it's like banking, a bank account. So on the day of transition, the day of stepping forth into another world, you already have a fully formed body that you move into. Gets rid of all the anxiety of passing. Mary was doing that. You know she was. Mary was doing that. Yes.
After she died, this bag of Fritos she had purchased.
Yeah. Yeah. I miss Mary. Sweetheart. So that's really the key to what the Egyptians were teaching relative to healing. Yeah, they knew herbs. They had 16 medicinal applications of cannabis. I found 15 so far, but no more. And so, their use of spells is probably the most fascinating thing I've learned about Egyptian healing, because they knew the power of thought, word, and gesture. And as I've said for years, it came fundamentally clear to me that that's really all you and I have to basically create our life, is thought, word, and gesture. You think about it, you speak it, and then you sign the lease. And away you go. Questions? Yes.
Okay. Double that Riemann cubit, it would be more powerful, which is really just a different object.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So if you did it more and more, it would be even more powerful?
Probably not. Once you hit that Riemann, you've kind of...
No, I mean,
No, if you...
Riemann, you said it was more powerful. Why not you triple it?
Once you have the double Riemann, that's as far as that goes. Yeah, yeah. It's just... Yes. Yeah. Now for outdoors, if you want to place rods outdoors, you go to the garden store and you get those green bamboo rods that are waterproof and cut those to length. And there's a real durable out in your yard. But you can do vast amounts of land, yes? Yes, the sacred cubit is resonating with hydrogen. Sacred. It's 25 inches, and when you divide 25 inches into 3, then you get the 8.333 inch waveform. The royal cubit is oxygen. What's interesting about the temple of Sakkara is it's a model of the human cell. I've got almost 200 pages written about the temple of Sakkara. It's a model of the human cell. As you walk through the colonnaded entrance, that gives you all of the key genetic code. There's pillars facing each other, and there's basically 23 pillars that identify our 46 chromosomes. And then at the very end of that, they have 4 different columns facing the opposite direction, and those are basically the 47th, 48th, and 49th chromosome that are simian and mongoloid. So there's substantial evidence. It's right in the king's chamber when you analyze the secret symbol I found. That's a formula for an amino acid, because when you have nitrogen, oxygen, carbon, and hydrogen, that's the 4 things you need for an amino acid. So there's a way of counting the wavelengths in those qubits, and this blew my son's mind when we counted it, and then we went online to do a chemical search, and we found that the information embedded in the secret symbol in the king's chamber gives us the amino acid formula for gene silencing. I thought, gee, why would this be written in the king's chamber? Well, because when they came down from Sirius, they said, got to do a little work on these guys. They got too many genes, a bunch of knuckle grabbers. So when you shut down 50 and 40, you eliminate mongoloid characteristics. When you shut down 48 and 47, you then have functional downs, or you eliminated that. So it's substantial that, and the physicists or the chemists that discovered this in 1973 got a Nobel Prize. So imagine there's substantial evidence written in the DNA structure at Sakkara about gene silencing. And then when you go to the Hebsed festival houses, well, our body is linked to Sirius. The ancient Egyptian name for Sirius was Sepdu, S-P-D, and the name for Sirius B was Peh, P-E-H, or P-A. Well, Pa is what the Dogons called the Sirius star. And the Dogons in Temple's book on the Sirius mystery, it's a substantiated fact that the Dogon tribe learned about the binary star system from the pre-dynastic Egyptians. So I've talked before about the importance of the Hebsed festival. This is the oldest celestial festival celebrated by human beings on the planet. It's related to the 50-year cycle that it takes Sirius B to complete 1 rotation around Sirius A. Once again, I asked astronomers, who told the Egyptians about this cycle? Because they've been tracking it for thousands and thousands of years. Earlier, there was a mention made about the famous zodiac of Dendera, the circle of life that's in the ceiling at Dendera. Schwaller de Lubitsch has confirmed that on that calendar, the Egyptians basically documented 2 complete precession of the equinoxes, which is 25,920 years. That means they were making astronomical observations for at least 2 precessions, because that's when everything starts to repeat. So, Dean Hardy was born in 1930. That was a year that the Masonic Lodge celebrated the Hebsed Festival, the 50-year cycle. Dean Hardy goes to Egypt in 1980. That's a second Hebsed Festival. Dean's 50 years old, and he's in Egypt to connect the Great Pyramid to the Pyramid in Allegan. Yesterday, we had a speaker help us connect us, or this space, with the Allegan Pyramid. Well, having been in Egypt in 1980, in 1981 with Mary and Dean, in 1980 I watched Dean connect the Great Pyramid to the Allegan Pyramid. We're both in the King's Chamber. And it's just, you do it by intention. And Dean knew that. Dean's the only person I've ever met in metaphysics that's given me the double Masonic handshake. Because we both knew we were old Masons, but we aren't Masons this time because, like we said, we don't have to join the second time. So that was a connection between Dean and I. I watched him connect that pyramid to Allegan, and it was with intention. So then the next year, here came John and Mary, and John and Mary were quite a team. I'm talking about Egypt, dude. John's 16. He's like this Geiger counter. He goes into the temples and he starts picking up stuff, and Mary's going, "What did you get, John? What did you get, John?" So they're a pretty good team. It was fun to watch them. So you can use that dermatome structure to determine your, if you think you're low on vitamin C, take your vitamin C, place it between the base of the foot and the ankle, and have somebody muscle test you or muscle test yourself. Years ago, I got tired of picking up parasites about every 2 months in the food chain. So I did a meditation and I asked my guides. I said, "How do you avoid parasites?" Well, I have redneck guides. So literally the answer came back, "Check your food before you buy it and eat it, stupid." Well, that's my guides. And so I thought, well, how do you check your food? You know, it's like, and then I thought, how many of you have been driving down the interstate and you're going too fast and all of a sudden your brain says, "Let up, you're going to get a ticket"? Happened to a lot of us. Well, what that is, that's your amygdala. Mary loved the amygdala. That's the part of the brainstem that protects you, and that's the part of the brainstem that suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder because a lot of guys can't figure out how to turn it off. So in a military environment, when you turn that on, your amygdala is scanning 7 to 14 miles on the horizon for danger. So I thought, well, that ought to work for parasites. So before I pick up something and put in my grocery cart, I either look at it and I say, is that food clear of parasites? Is that food clear of food poisoning? Is that food safe to eat? And if I get a yes, 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 it goes in the cart. My wife's very good at this. She does it without muscle testing. My granddaughter at 9 years old picked this technique up without muscle testing because they trust themselves. I don't trust myself, so I have to test. But knock on wood, I haven't gotten a parasite for about 15 years because I check everything I eat. And so I've got a number of my clients that do the same technique because parasites are just rampant. They're just all over the place.
Hear a loud noise or something happens and do it, it's reversed. So when I first started, I couldn't do, Mary was always gouging. She'd go round and round and she'd get a stick. That was the it. She said, "You need this homeopathic, it's stuck." And she was dying. Virginia called me. She was tapping on her hands. I said, "Oh my God, Virginia, she's gouging." So, then when I started doing it, I used my whole body to do it. I was a preschool kindergarten teacher. I'm So if I say I found the quickest way for me, and in the beginning I asked, show me the yes in the present moment. And I really, all over the book. I can't. So no, I'm doubting. So I just go, show me the yes in the present moment. I would just move forward. And I pick up this apple safe to eat. So by me, this means comparison. It's safe to eat. Get a no, put it back down. But then as I'm going along, I don't, well, I got a yes 5 minutes ago. I'll do it again, and it's so natural now, I can do it without moving, I just feel the force in my body. And, you know, so upstairs, I got a potato to eat, that we were offered tonight. Just to but anyway, so that just gives you, and it's the easiest way for me. So, just told her.
So one point about that is because your electrical field can constantly change polarity. You might be plus here, minus, next minute something shocks you. So it's important before you use that rock and roll method, say, show me a yes in the present moment. So I roll backwards. But then if I create a disturbance, show me a yes in the present moment, now I'm rolling forward. So just make sure that you check which is your valid yes or no, and that's also a good way. I was doing that one time over at Costco's in front of a freezer section, and this lady walked up, she saw me weaving back and forth, and she says, are you having a senior moment? So this is safer.
Me check.
Yes. Now, you can also do remote testing. Yeah. So you don't have to have your food in front of you on a remote test. All you have to do is picture your restaurant that you want to go eat at and your favorite food you order, and you say, is the fish and chips at Jim Brady's clear of parasites tonight? Yep. Any parasites in Jim Brady's fish and chips? Nope. We're going to Jim Brady's. So it's just one of those things where I've learned how to tap into higher states of consciousness just by manually testing. And I started doing this like clear back in high school, my senior year. I looked at my football coach and I says, I know where the quarterback goes before he hikes the ball. I says, I think I'm psychic. And he looked at me, straightened his glasses. He says, you know, there's a thin line between a psychic and a psychotic. So I never wanted to ask him which side he thought it was on. But so I hope you got the ley lines. And please, this was Mary's dream to connect us all. And this is the cheapest pyramid you can build. And you will notice a difference once you post these rods in the house. Cats love them. They love this type of balanced space. Dogs could care less. When we used to douse the field at this one area I was working at, the owners had about 4 dogs, and we'd have like surveyor's flags stuck in the field where the crossing points were. The next morning you'd wake up and the dogs were laying on the crossing points of the ley lines. So the old joke is, don't sleep where a sleeping dog lays. You know, go find your cat and go, it's my place. Yes. Oh, yeah. Inside of the house with these rods is just fine. And again, it doesn't have to be like perfectly, you know, you just find north, south, and then just, they don't have to be perfect. There could be more space between one group, but it just flat works. We've had a lot of people, we've been doing these rods for close to maybe, I just set them in the corner and I check them once in a while. Oh, I'm sorry. They're easier to stand up, but they also work laying down, which I'd never done this before until today. I thought, well, I got to lay them down. There's no place to, it just works. No, just do your north, south, east, west axis like your temple. And then the next thing when you're building a temple is you define the 4 cornerstones. So that's where your rods go. And like, you know, we've got an L-shaped condo with a garage. So I've got rods over here in the garage, and it doesn't have to be a perfect square. Plus my car just loves it. You had a question? Yeah. Well, when you end up, you know, your friends notice you're starting to drool a little bit, slur your words. Oh, you've got your rods in the wrong place. Yes, Paul. Yes.
You know, some people have a hard time with altitude, climbing hills. Would you carry an oxygen rod? Or
Yeah.
oil?
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah. Oh, and thanks for getting back to Sakkara. Sakkara has a perimeter wall that's 1 mile in length, surrounds the whole complex. And the wall is based on 20.6 inches, 5 inches out, 20.6 inches, 5 inches in, and it goes that way all the way around the complex. Well, the exterior wall of a cell is oxygen. That's why oxidation is so dangerous. So here, this model of a cell has an operative wall around it. And Ginger shared her knowledge last year about the heart is this kind of like this twin engine. Well, when the Egyptians built the step pyramid, they know that the nucleus in the step pyramid itself represents the nucleus of the cell. It's got 6 levels, but in cellular development, the nucleus starts out as 4 levels. And the pyramid, the step pyramid, then started out with 4 levels, and it was a square. And then to take it to the next level, they built 6 levels and converted the square to a double square. Moving from the square to the double square then is the secret of all Genesis. So when I discovered the secret symbol hidden in the king's chamber of the pyramid, it's a huge right triangle, 50 inches by 100 inches. It's a 1 to 2 right triangle. And I'm going, wow. Because in embryogenesis, to get a 1 to 2 right triangle, you start with a square. The diagonal of a square is the square root of 2. When you double the square, the double square then has the diagonal of square root of 5. Now, in between the square root of 5 and the square root of 2, you have this 19-degree angle. In mathematics, the 19-degree angle is called the pilot number. It's pervasive throughout the universe. And that's a harmonic to the 38 76-degree angles that are built into the pyramid. So the Egyptian masters, wherever they got this information, and it said that the body of information that we're looking at in Egypt right now was inherited as a complete doctrine. They didn't have to do any additional research. It was just, here, this is everything we know. And Mary Hardy was absolutely right, and I used to argue with her. We've had some great arguments in the pyramid because she said it comes from Sirius. And back in the 80s, I just couldn't wrap my mind around that until all of a sudden, 1995, Mary, they come from Sirius. So that's where all this information that's hidden in Egypt, in the Hall of Records. And what I believe to be the Hall of Records is the Egyptians created a temple that has a 600-mile axis. You've been in it. So anywhere you stand in that 600-mile temple, it's based on the biological anatomy of the human being. You can see it overlay. Every temple in Egypt then represents a chapter in the book of coming forth, in the book of man's development. It's awesome what they left us, and it's just waiting to be encoded right now. I'm excited about speaking at Marta Thomas's event in Chicago because my son and I have been holding back on 5 major archaeological discoveries that we found in the Great Pyramid, and these discoveries can be documented using a measuring tape, a compass, and a ruler. So, getting back to this grid, in the king's chamber above the doorway, you have the largest granite block in the king's chamber. It's massive, and that's where the secret symbol has been engraved into the surface. Well, what's interesting is when you measure the diagonal of that cornerstone, the diagonal is 3753 degrees. That's 1 degree from being 3852. So then, in the temple clear down in southern Egypt, Schwaller de Lubitsch discovered a canvas grid that is 1 inch by 1 inch larger than this grid. And so when you, the ley line, so when you superimpose this canvas grid onto the cornerstone, there's a 1 inch difference on the top and the bottom. And in physics, that's the oscillatory rate. So the 3-4-5 triangle is the triangle they use in construction to create 90-degree angles. And they say of that the 3-4-5 triangle is possible because you build with it. and it's set at a 3852, that's the angle it resonates, that's the geometric angle it resonates with the phi ratio. And the phi ratio is all pervasive through the universe. The phi ratio determines the ratio of my bones to each other. The phi ratio determines the distance of the planets with each other. It's as pervasive as you can imagine. And based on what the Egyptians were saying about the 3852-degree angle and phi, it's the same thing that the modern day physicists have been saying about the Higgs boson. It's the very same thing. It's the primary fundamental energy that creates all things in the universe, and it's the phi ratio. It's been in front of our face all this time, and the Egyptians knew it. So that's a pretty big deal. Yes.
Some of what you're saying, I've heard the man say is how they can go against the wind currents to keep the building from swaying too much, and how they're building small pyramids so that it goes through the building instead of around it.
Yeah.
God wants to share.
Yeah. Well, it's just they're finally. I think our architects are finally getting to the level that the ancient Egyptians were. I noticed this when I was studying the Mayan pyramids. In order to create a specific vibrational field, the masons in the Mayan pyramids would put 7 blocks in the first course, 6 blocks on the second course, and by doing and varying the size of the blocks and the number, they were creating actual vibrations throughout their temples, just by number. Pardon? Yes. Yep. So the number of stones, so on. So again, this is something that we're starting to implement in medicine. All these angles work very well for creating your own homeopathic to support your fundamental vibration of each organ in the body. Any other questions? Yes. You could, but all you have to do is just speak the vibration. Like if you say 3852 to your water and you say that 4 times, you've got the frequency of the heart, the governing the central meridian. So the Egyptians had a working knowledge of acupuncture, except they chose to do acupressure, and there's substantial evidence that that's where the Chinese got their information for acupressure. If you look at the profile of the human body, you see the pharaoh holding the staff, the shepherd's staff, and the rod. Well, the shepherd's staff is the exact duplicate of the governing meridian. Goes down and terminates at the tailbone. See your shepherd's staff? The rod that the pharaoh holds is the central meridian. So they understood the components of the meridian system. And on the royal cubit, again, the first time I came out to Hardy's and spoke, I brought the royal cubit with me, and I demonstrated how the 28 digits on the royal cubit are in the exact same order that the organs in the human body manifest during embryogenesis. The royal cubit lists the appearance of the organs in the actual sequence that they appear in embryogenesis. So you start with the governing meridian, the central meridian, and then the first meridian is the heart meridian. Then the second meridian is the large intestine meridian. So let's talk about colon health for a moment. The most esteemed priest in the Egyptian temple had the title of Keeper of the Royal Rectum, because the Egyptians learned the value of colon cleansing. They'd watch the migratory birds come in from a long flight, and the birds with the long bills would land in the water, sip some water, and give themselves a colonic to rehydrate the body after a long flight. So the Egyptians go, I'm convinced that that's what kept Mary going for a whole another year. And like I told her 20 years ago, I says, you and Dean ought to do a 7-day colon cleanse every year. We do. That's what you do to keep the colon happy. Dr. Bernard Jensen's work, tissue cleansing through bowel management. At 28, I was so messed up and full of carbon and toxic foods that the Mayo Clinic didn't even want to touch me. They wanted to remove my gallbladder and pull out my small intestine and look at it. And I says, didn't the damn x-ray work? So I fled from there, and a friend of mine showed me Jensen's tissue cleansing through bowel management. And she says, you're full of shit and parasites. I said, I've been told I'm full of shit before, but what's this parasite thing? So I called up Jensen. I says, I'm desperate. I says, I got to come down and study with you. He says, well, we've only got classes for professionals. He says, are you a nurse? I said, no. So are you a doctor? No. I said, I'm a hypochondriac, damn it, I need help. So I went down and I was only going to study with Jensen for a couple of weeks because when I looked at the pictures in his book of the material that builds up in the colon, I said, I don't have that. I'm an athlete. So because it was a medical class, you had to put a spaghetti colander in the toilet bowl to catch all the stuff you're sloughing off. I had material that was lining my colon that was an inch thick at 33 years old. Statistically, I just set myself up for all sorts of cancers in my 40s, 50s, and 60s because I had no idea how to eat or keep the colon happy. So from that time, on a daily basis, I take a tablespoon of psyllium. I take my psyllium to Egypt. I've sent psyllium to my friends in Egypt. And so one nice tablespoon of psyllium starts to help move things along so you don't build up that great big toxic wall. That's called retoxic vicariation. That's where your body's now reabsorbing toxins, trying to get nutrients. So the Egyptians understood that. They understood colon health. They relatively had a pretty good diet. And for the most part, Egyptologists have totally missed the finer parts of what Egypt has to offer. You know, they've been walking in this huge 600-mile temple with no idea of what they're looking at, none whatsoever. And it's just consistent through each temple. My vision for this group, what really lit up the Sakkara conference back in 1980 was most of us had gone to Egypt. When you'd go to a conference in 1980, there would maybe be 25 people that had been to Egypt and 15 people that hadn't. So one thing that might really get this organization going and getting younger people involved, because there's young people out there that are just, people are just as crazy about pyramids now as we were, but nobody's telling them about the pyramids. I tried 3 times to inform the antiquities department that I found the secret symbol in the king's chamber. I got a personal letter back from Zahi Hawass that says, glad that you have such an interest in Egypt. Yeah, he didn't care. He didn't care. If I would have found a mummy, he would have been excited. But
When you read the book reference is like
my thought on the Hall of Records, because of what I've seen, because of, and I'd highly recommend the work of Schwaller, R.A. Schwaller de Lubitsch, and his wife Isha Schwaller. Schwaller is like the French, well, no, no. I'll think of it in a moment. The German philosopher. Oh. Steiner. Schwaller is like the French version of Rudolf Steiner, and had not World War II kicked in, Schwaller would probably be one of the most renowned physicists on the planet, and Egyptologist. He spent 15 years in the Temple of Luxor, and basically he cracked the Hermetic codes. He determined that the Temple of Luxor is built in the scale of the human body. So then that's what they patterned their geodetic survey. Now what's interesting is the Temple of Luxor, relative to that 600-mile geodetic temple, the Temple of Luxor is located in the womb at a 14-degree angle, which is the same 14-degree angle that babies are presenting as they go down through the channel. So it's like the geodetic temple is giving birth to the Luxor temple. And Schwaller proved beyond a doubt that when you go up into the area of the pituitary gland, on the walls in that temple are profound dissertations on the function of the pituitary gland. These guys just flat knew it. I've got a book on the geodetic survey, and it's about 240 pages. And so I found that when you go up into the delta where the head is, they actually have a town in the delta called the town of the eyebrows. And when you superimpose a pharaonic head over that, everything fits. And all of a sudden, the brainstem, everything starts to fall into place. So what a brilliant way to record all of the metaphysical information relative to the human body, because it'd be so dangerous to put it in a small room like this. It'd be compromised. The Greeks would have messed it up. Or Romans. So that's been my journey in Egypt. It's been fabulous. I think it's a good time to go back to Egypt. It's always a good time to go back to Egypt. And again, think of a 5-day tour, 1 day to go to Egypt, 5 days in country, and 1 day to come back, where you do nothing but specialize on the pyramids in Giza. That way you don't have the excessive travel to Luxor, and you can just focus on pyramids. And right now the tours are like $7,000 to $8,000 if it's a 5-star, and you might be able to get that price down to maybe $5,000. Yeah. But if you did just a 5-day thing, maybe in Giza, stayed in 1-star hotels. But that's something that could get a lot of young people enrolled in this again. Any other questions? You're a great audience. I've enjoyed this. So thank you, thank you. Thank you. Yeah.